New York City. It's the early 1900s. Millions immigrate through Ellis Island every year, making it a melting pot of culture. The city has become one of the densest ever built. Manhattan's Lower East Side alone holds 315,000 people per square mile. The automobile, once a novelty, begins to turn down production lines, becoming more common every year. The sounds of the streets are deafening. The people of the city combine for an unimaginable amount of ambition and power. This isn't just technological progress. The city needs to adapt. The chaotic nature of it all is too much to bear. It must be controlled. Dubbed the power broker, this is what Robert Moses believed. At his peak, he wielded more authority than any elected official. Given the title Master Builder, he constructed over a dozen bridges, connecting millions of people between boroughs. He would also create hundreds of miles of expressways. Thousands were displaced, and neighborhoods forever divided. This is the story of how Robert Moses gained his power. Moses' journey to power begins in the early 1920s. Long Island had long been home of the wealthy. Few people were able to access the country clubs, private land, and beaches. As head of the Long Island State Park Commission, young Robert Moses had his eyes set on Jones Beach State Park. With funding secured, luxury homes would be forcefully removed from the site to create room for the 6.5-mile public beach. Because Long Island was so isolated, there would need to be a connection. Southern State Parkway would serve as this conduit. The project made such quick progress because it was marketed for the people. Everyone would now be able to access the beaches on Long Island. Parkways were an innovative type of road. They were landscaped and provided scenic views. They were considered public parks and were under the jurisdiction of Robert Moses. When the parkways were being constructed, however, Moses would advocate for low-clearance bridges. This would prevent lower-class individuals from reaching the beach via public bus. It was manipulations such as these that allowed Robert Moses to gain his authority. He pitched his projects for the people. He gained public approval, but only those who were able to afford a private automobile would be allowed to access the beach. He would throw events for the rich and powerful on Jones Beach. The flattery and hospitality served as a powerful political weapon. Most importantly, Moses was efficient. He was renowned for getting things done. He had navigated the complicated labyrinth of New York bureaucracy. His foot was now in the door. Moses wanted to make a splash. He had dreams of urban renewal, a world where work life and home life would be completely separate. In the 1930s, the private automobile was exploding in popularity. Telling someone in this time to take public transportation over an automobile was blasphemy. Despite never getting his license, Moses recognized this, and after years of navigating and learning the inner workings of state governments, Moses had seen an avenue to power nobody else had seen. Moses would meet with the then mayor of New York, Fiorello LaGuardia, who invited him to join his administration. Moses demanded that he get unified power over all city parks. This not only included the 5 separate park departments for each of the boroughs, but also extended authority to include parkways. Moses also ordered the creation of 2 public authorities, the Henry Hudson Bridge and the Marine Parkway Bridge. Most of all, Moses wanted his key to power, the Triborough Bridge Authority. The idea to connect the 3 boroughs had been dreamed of by many, but securing funding proved to be difficult. Moses had plans to fix this, but he needed complete control of the authority. As the mayor, LaGuardia would be given the credit for finally connecting the 3 boroughs. Moses was known to be effective and efficient. The project would finally get moving. Moses enthusiastically offered to write the bills for these changes. How could LaGuardia deny him? It was an excellent move. In hindsight, it's no wonder why he wanted control of the public authorities. But in the 1930s, they had a reputation. Traditionally, public authorities received government funding for a single public work. The public work would be built. Tolls would be installed to pay for it. Tolls then would be used by the public, and once the debt was paid, The public authority would turn off the tolls and hand the public improvement back to the government. The authority would then cease to exist once this process was complete. This is what LaGuardia thought would happen when Moses ordered for control of the authorities. Moses, however, had picked up on a few tricks. He was able to sneak something deep into the pages of the Charbel Bridge Authority Bill. At the very beginning in Section 1, the bill states, "The Charbel Board and its corporate existence shall continue only for a period of 5 years, and thereafter until all its bonds have been paid in full." This is then contradicted many pages later. In Section 9, it states, "The authority shall have power from time to time to refund any bonds by the issuance of new bonds, whether the bonds to be refunded have or have not matured, and may issue bonds partly to refund bonds then outstanding and partly for any other corporate purpose." This text is confusing, but it completely revolutionized the way American cities are built. To put it simply, this essentially means that Moses had the ability to reissue 40-year bonds every 39 years. The cycle would repeat itself as many times as he desired. The Charbel Bridge Authority would exist until all of its bonds had been paid in full. However, because Moses had planned on having other highways and parkways feed into the bridge, there was always something to be built. The Charbel Bridge connects the 3 boroughs of Manhattan, the Bronx, and Queens. With a planned length of 17.5 miles, it would begin construction at the end of 1934. The construction of the bridge was something to behold. Materials were imported from over 50 steel mills throughout the states. Robert Caro, author of The Power Broker, says, "Charbel was not a bridge so much as a traffic machine, the largest ever built. The amount of human energy expended in its construction gives some idea of its immensity. More than 5,000 men would be working at the site, and these men would only be putting into place the materials furnished by the labor of many times 5,000 men. Before the Charbel Bridge was completed, its construction would have generated more than 31 million man-hours of work in 134 cities in 20 states." In 1936, the Charbel Bridge would open. It was immensely popular. In its first year of operation, the bridge generated $2.72 million, or $55 million in today's money. Grand Central Parkway would open shortly after, demolishing anything in its way. It would provide a seamless drive for those outside of the city. According to the Charbel Act that Moses himself wrote, he was given the authority to acquire land that connected to bridge approaches. But if a road connects to another road that connects to the Charbel Bridge, should that not be under the control of the authority? Because of this, there wasn't an inch of New York that Moses didn't have control over. While the city, state, and national governments were strapped for cash in the Great Depression, Robert Moses was swimming in it. Moses would go on to feed this process. Instead of paying his bonds off, he would use his revenue from the tolls to add more tunnels, more parkways, and more expressways. His popularity was growing, and so was his power. By the 1960s, Moses had established himself. He was no longer below the mayor or governor of New York. He was their equal. It could be argued that as the city's master constructor, he was above them. Moses was an unelected official. He was never voted in. He wasn't the CEO of a business. He was a government employee with the power of a corporation. This couldn't last for much longer. But before Moses would call it quits, he would begin advocating for his final project, the Lower Manhattan Expressway.
I'd say the area from 125th Street down to the Battery on Manhattan Island. I don't think you can ever meet that kind of congestion wholly because the city's overbuilt there. There are too many big buildings, there are too many people coming in and out. That was bad planning that permitted that.
This was Moses's biggest project. Lower Manhattan was one of the few areas of New York he wasn't able to touch. It had no immediate access to the outside world, and with more and more New Yorkers buying private vehicles, traffic congestion in Manhattan was at an all-time high. Big businesses who were dependent on moving goods out of the city sided with Moses. One of these players was David Rockefeller. This part of the city was filled with apartments atop diners and shoe shiners down the road from the rail yard. This was everything against Robert Moses' vision of urban renewal. The modern American city would completely separate work life from home life. The expressway would cut straight through the unplanned Lower Manhattan. With funding secured and some of the most powerful figures in New York on his side, Moses' dream of urban renewal would finally come true. That was until neighborhood activist Jane Jacobs arrived. Jacobs advocated for the historic, unplanned, and untidy neighborhood that had served her and her neighbors well for decades. Penn Station had once served the community well. During its peak in World War II, more than 100 million passengers would travel through the station. With the expansion of expressways, interstates, and parkways, Moses had created a world of car dependency. The Pennsylvania Railroad was bankrupt, and the station was poorly maintained, dirty, and well past its prime. The demolition of the station was inevitable. What wasn't expected was the uprising. Jacobs had cultivated groups of activists that took pride in the historic urban fabric of the city. Moses had dealt with neighborhood opposition before, and it never stopped him. But with the activists that Jacobs had cultivated, the Lower Manhattan Expressway had an overwhelming disapproval among New Yorkers. For the first time in his career, Moses was on the back foot. The destruction of Penn Station revitalized the New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission, and the agency would become very powerful. The increased protection of New York's historic neighborhoods proved to be a major roadblock in Moses' agenda. With the city of New York being awoken to the damage that Moses and his urban renewal policies caused, public officials also turned against him, and his career would effectively be terminated in 1972 when he was not granted the reappointment for the chairman for the Triborough Tunnel and Bridge Authority. Moses had already made his impact, however. 13 bridges, roughly 211 miles of expressways, and 416 miles of parkways. He would displace about 250,000 people with his urban renewal policies. Traffic was at an all-time high, and the way the American city was built had been changed forever. An unelected official who built his power from loopholes and understanding the inner workings of the government had managed to play God with millions of lives for 4 decades. The mass migration and change that Moses single-handedly made is that of a dictator. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you. This is my first video, and it was a joy to create. If you have any feedback, please don't hesitate to leave a comment. I plan on creating and telling more stories, so please like and subscribe to stay up to date. Thank you.